They said I had his eyes, but no one ever warned me what I might see when I looked in the mirror. Ethan Whitmore, age 17. The Whitmore name was never spoken in Claire's house. Not by friends, not by neighbors, and especially not by her son. Ethan had grown up in a carefully constructed world of silence, where the past was locked behind closed doors and the truth was buried in bedtime stories rewritten to protect him. But secrets have a way of leaking through the cracks, especially the ones soaked in blood. It started with a knock on the door, an envelope, no return address. Inside, a letter. Ethan deserves to know. He's old enough now. He has questions, and I have answers. Gee, Grace. That name hadn't been spoken in over a decade. Claire's hands trembled as she read the words. She thought Grace had disappeared after Daniel's downfall. Thought she'd vanished like the others, too ashamed or too dangerous to surface again. But she was back, and she wanted Ethan. Ethan had grown curious over the years. Why did they move so often? Why were there no family photos from before he was born? Why did people whisper when they passed them in public? But most of all, why did his mother flinch whenever he looked her in the eyes? He asked once, just once, if she would ever tell him about his father. Claire said, when the time is right. But now, someone else had beaten her to it. Ethan found the letter. Read it, and everything changed. The address was in New York, an apartment tucked above a quiet bookstore. Grace lived simply now, under a new name, but the fire in her eyes was unchanged. When Ethan knocked, she opened the door like she'd been waiting his whole life. You have his face, she whispered. I'm not him. Let's hope not. Inside, she told him everything. About Daniel, about Claire's betrayal, about the murder, the manipulation, the revenge. But she didn't stop there. She gave him something else. A USB drive. He left it for you. Said one day, you'd come looking. Ethan hesitated but took it. That night, he plugged it into his laptop. A single folder opened. Inside, video files. Dozens of them. His father, speaking directly to him. Lessons, stories, confessions. Like he planned for this all along. And Ethan, despite every warning, every instinct, couldn't stop watching. As days passed, Ethan began to change. His posture, his speech, the calm, eerie way he began observing people, like they were pieces on a board. Claire noticed. At first, she thought it was just teenage rebellion. Until one night, she found his laptop unlocked. She watched 5 seconds of one video. That was enough. Daniel's voice poured through the speakers like poison. If you want to win in this world, Ethan, never play fair. People respect fear. Love is a weakness. Mercy is a myth. But power? Power is eternal. Claire snapped the laptop shut, her hands shaking. It was happening. The nightmare she tried to bury was clawing its way back through her son. Detective Melissa Grant, now retired, lived in a cabin far from the city. But when she got Claire's call, she came. Together, they reviewed the footage. This isn't just a confession, Grant said. It's a blueprint. Ethan wasn't just being manipulated. He was being trained. Daniel had recorded over 100 hours of psychological grooming, teaching Ethan how to read people, exploit weakness, command respect, and wield control. He wasn't passing on wisdom. He was creating a legacy. But there was one video Daniel never meant for Ethan to see. Hidden, encrypted. Grant managed to crack it. What they found nearly shattered Claire. Footage of the original plan. The one Claire thought she'd outsmarted. The one that didn't backfire. Because Daniel wanted her to betray him. It had all been orchestrated. Even his arrest. Even prison. The best way to stay in control, Daniel said on screen, is to become the victim. Let them think they've won. They'll never see the next move coming. Claire dropped the laptop. She wasn't the hero in this story. She'd been the pawn all along. Ethan stood in the doorway. He had heard everything. The betrayal, the lies, the truth. But what no one saw coming was the decision he made next. I want to meet him, he said. Absolutely not, Claire snapped. He's evil. He's my father. That's not who you are. You don't know who I am, he whispered. You never did. It took a court order. Weeks of fighting. But eventually, Ethan won the right. A single supervised visit. The prison doors groaned as they opened. Inside, a man waited. Older, grayer, but eyes sharp as razors. Daniel Whitmore stood and smiled. Took you long enough, son. Ethan stared, silent. Then, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Let's make a deal," he said. Daniel's eyebrows raised. "I'm listening. You think you're in control, but control is the first illusion that breaks when the blood runs." Daniel Whitmore, recorded prison video, 2017. The prison visitor room was cold, sterile, tense. Daniel sat on one side of the thick, scratched glass, his hands cuffed, a slight smile playing at the corners of his lips. Across from him sat Ethan, leaning forward, voice calm, but eyes burning. "I'll listen to your story," Ethan said, "but only if you give me something real in return." Daniel leaned in. "What do you want, son?" "The truth, not the performance, not the mask. The truth about her, about Grace, and about the other woman no one talks about." Daniel's smile twitched. So Claire didn't burn everything after all." That was confirmation. There was another woman, one who vanished just before Claire's escape. The missing link in a twisted legacy. Ethan hadn't known her name. Until now. Daniel whispered it. Her name was Lena. Lena Hartwell had been Daniel's mistress, a former psychology student. Young, brilliant, and easily seduced by charisma and wealth. She disappeared 6 weeks before Daniel's arrest. No trace, no body. Claire had always claimed Lena ran off, but Grace's letter hinted otherwise. "There's more blood on Claire's hands than you know." Ethan returned home that night different. Quiet, observant. He didn't confront his mother, not yet. Instead, he started digging. A private investigator. Digital footprints. Bank transactions. Phone pings. Eventually, something surfaced. A storage unit. Registered in a false name, but paid for, oddly, by Grace. Ethan waited until nightfall to go. He had no idea what he'd find. The unit was buried deep in a facility that hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. Dust clung to every surface. The metal door groaned open. Inside, a single crate. And inside the crate, old videotapes. Journals. A cell phone. A small, stained diary with LH embossed on the front. He flipped it open. "Daniel told me he loved me, but I know how he looks at Claire. She's the one he wants to destroy, not leave." Ethan's hands trembled as he flipped pages. He said I was the backup plan, that if Claire betrayed him, I'd be the one to carry out his insurance. I don't know what that means. I'm scared. The last entry read, "Claire found out. She said I had a choice, disappear or die. If anyone finds this, I'm sorry." The diary changed everything. Ethan realized the people he loved were not who they pretended to be. His mother didn't just run from Daniel. She may have eliminated his mistress. And Grace, who supposedly wanted to expose the truth, had been hiding the evidence the whole time. But why? He confronted Grace the next day. She didn't deny it. "You don't know what your father was capable of. Or your mother. I kept that unit hidden to protect you from both of them. That wasn't your decision to make. You're right. But neither of them should ever have had a child. You were a miracle born out of a nightmare. No, I was a weapon born out of a war." The dramatic irony tightened like a noose. Ethan had come searching for the truth, hoping it would set him free. Instead, it was imprisoning him. He was the product of betrayal on both sides. Daniel, controlling, violent, calculated. Claire, desperate, deceptive, and willing to kill to protect her version of the future. But neither had told him the most important truth of all. He was never supposed to be born. Lena's final journal entry revealed it. I overheard Claire say Ethan wasn't hers. Not really. She took him, raised him to keep him out of Daniel's grip. He was meant for something darker. Something Daniel had planned. The room spun. Who was he? Ethan wasn't just some tragic orphan of a criminal love triangle. He was the centerpiece of it. The one Daniel believed would carry his legacy. The one Claire tried to rewrite. The one Grace tried to protect or control. And now he had them all where he wanted them. He started recording his own videos, daily journals, confessionals, strategy memos. But he didn't keep them to himself. He began sharing them, anonymously, through an underground podcast. The Blood That Remains, an expose series based on his own life. The public didn't know who he was yet, but the story spread like wildfire. The tale of a boy raised between two murderers, a child caught in the aftermath of a psychological war. And then, episode 10 dropped, the one where Ethan revealed the existence of the Lena Hartwell tapes. He didn't release them. He just let the world know they existed. And now everyone wanted to know, where was Lena? Pressure mounted. Claire couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The news was closing in. And then it happened. A hiker in upstate Vermont stumbled upon a shallow grave. Bones. Female. A rusted bracelet with the initials LH. Claire was arrested within 48 hours. The evidence was circumstantial, but damning. DNA matched hair found in the grave to strands Claire had stored in an old locket. Grace was brought in for obstruction. And Ethan? He watched it unfold from his apartment window. Expression unreadable. Daniel called the next day from prison. I told you, son. Blood find his way home. I'm not coming home, Ethan said. Yes, you are, Daniel replied softly. You just don't know it yet. A package arrived at Ethan's door. Inside, an envelope and a plane ticket to Colorado. The envelope had one line. You've heard their story. Now it's time to hear mine. The sender? Lena Hartwell. There are two kinds of ghosts. Those who haunt others, and those who haunt themselves. Excerpt from Lena Hartwell's hidden memoir. The woman on the bench didn't look like a ghost, but to Ethan, she might as well have been. Lena Hartwell, dead for over a decade, buried in the woods. Yet here she sat alive. Her face had aged, but her eyes were sharp, calculating, tired, defiant. You said you were dead. No, they did, she said, and I let them. They met in a secluded park in Boulder, Colorado, just days after Ethan received the letter. The plane ticket had been real. So was the story she was about to tell. You want the truth? Lena whispered. You're not ready, but you need it. Lena's story shattered everything Ethan thought he knew. Claire didn't kill her. Not exactly. After Claire found out about the affair with Daniel, she confronted Lena in a rage. But instead of murdering her, she offered her something more chilling. You want to live? Then disappear. But I'll decide how you vanish. Claire had orchestrated it all. The fake grave, the jewelry planted near the body, the missing persons report redacted under false names. And Lena agreed. I wasn't innocent. I knew too much. I had helped Daniel launder money. I knew where the bodies were buried. Literally. If I didn't vanish, I'd be the next one. But what she didn't realize was that disappearing meant living in exile, under the threat that Daniel, or someone worse, would find her if she ever surfaced. In the motel room Lena now called home, she pulled out a worn leather journal. Everything's in here, she said. The accounts, the names, the safe houses, the kill list, Daniel's kill list, an actual document with the names of people he considered liabilities. Claire's name was on it. So was Grace. But Ethan noticed something even more disturbing. His own name had been added, scribbled in red ink. When was this updated? He asked. 2 years ago, Lena replied. Someone visited me, left at my door. It wasn't Daniel. Then who? I don't know. But he called himself the Reaper. The Reaper wasn't a metaphor. It was a real person. Lena described him as a former enforcer for Daniel, someone who vanished after the trial. Untraceable, a ghost, the kind of man who knew how to make people disappear for real. And now he was back, not to protect Daniel, but to clean up his mess. He's tying up loose ends, Lena warned. You, me, Claire, even Daniel. None of us are safe. Ethan realized this wasn't just about exposing the truth anymore. It was about survival. But what haunted him more than the threat of death was a single, nagging question. Why was his name on the list? What had Daniel been planning for him? Back in Vermont, Claire sat in her cell, trembling. She had heard the news. Lena was alive. And then her phone rang. Private line. 1 minute only. A male voice on the other end. You failed, the voice said. I did what I had to do. No, you let her live. Now he knows. Ethan, she whispered. He's the variable we never controlled. And now he's off the board. The line went dead. Claire collapsed into her bunk. Not out of fear, but out of dread. Because she now understood what Daniel had meant when he said Ethan was coming home. Back in Colorado, Lena finally told Ethan the secret no one dared say out loud. You weren't just born into this. You were bred for it. Daniel had wanted a successor. A legacy not just of wealth, but control. He had carefully selected Claire because of her bloodline, her family's criminal background. And Lena? She was part of the insurance plan in case Claire turned. Ethan wasn't an accident. He was a project, raised to be charming, strategic, detached from emotion, but driven by justice. A natural manipulator, a thinker, a survivor. You were the endgame, Ethan, not the story, the sequel. And then came the twist. There's someone else like you. Someone Daniel made before you. Ethan froze. A sibling. No, Lena said. A prototype. Ethan dug deeper. Old photographs. Financial records. Surveillance footage from prison visits that never made it to official logs. And there he was. A boy. Maybe 3 years older. Same eyes. Same mannerisms. Same scar on the left hand. Name, Simon Cross. An alias. A ghost in every database. And according to the prison logs, Simon visited Daniel 2 months ago. Behind bars, Daniel had been preparing something all along. Not just redemption, not just revenge, a resurrection. Ethan returned to his hotel room to find a black envelope on his bed. No postage, no fingerprints. Inside, a single photograph. Simon, Lena, and Daniel together. The date? 3 weeks ago, and scrawled on the back in red ink. Welcome to the real family. There's nothing more dangerous than a man who's been raised to believe he's untouchable. Claire Hartwell, in her final confession letter. Ethan stared at the photo again. 3 people, his mother, Lena, his father, Daniel, and the man who was supposed to be a myth, Simon Cross, the ghost in the records. A half-brother, or worse, his replacement. Why hasn't anyone ever mentioned him? Ethan asked Lena the next day. She hesitated, then gave him the one answer he didn't want to hear. Because we weren't supposed to. Lena revealed that Simon was Daniel's first experiment. Born out of a hidden affair during Daniel's early political days, Simon had been raised off the grid, privately schooled, trained in psychological manipulation, financial warfare, and even intelligence tactics. He was brilliant, Lena said, but unstable. Cold. Too much Daniel, not enough heart. So he was locked away. But Daniel never let go. Simon was Daniel's greatest creation and his greatest mistake. Back in the Vermont prison, Claire Hartwell was preparing to make a deal. Her confession tapes had made their way into federal hands, and the feds were starting to believe her story about Daniel's wider criminal network. But Claire had one condition. I want full immunity for Ethan. No matter what's discovered, no matter what happens. The lead investigator, Agent Mira Calloway, had doubts. You really think he's innocent in all this? I think he's about to be used. And if Simon is really back, Ethan's not the hunter anymore. He's the prey. Claire had always controlled people with words. But now, with time running out, she used the only thing she had left. The location of a hidden vault in New Hampshire, one Daniel used to hide his darkest files. Evidence, secrets, blackmail. And inside, according to Claire, was something more disturbing. Proof of what Ethan really is. Ethan and Agent Calloway reached the vault 2 days later. Tucked away beneath an abandoned ski lodge, it was exactly where Claire described. Hidden behind a false wall, protected by biometric locks, Daniel's signature style. Inside, they found thousands of documents, photos, bank accounts, wiretap transcripts, and a hard drive titled simply, The Legacy Project. Calloway ran the data. It contained psychological reports, behavioral assessments, even surveillance footage from Ethan's childhood. His conversations were logged, his habits monitored, the schools he was sent to, all controlled by Daniel's network. He raised you like a weapon, Calloway said, stunned. A product, not a son. And Simon? Ethan asked. There was a folder marked Archive 1, Simon Cross. But the files have been recently wiped. Whoever got there before them wanted Simon erased from history again. That night, Lena received a call from an unlisted number. You told him, a calm voice said. You always did talk too much. It was Simon. She recognized the tone immediately. Quiet, rehearsed, polite. Chilling. Leave him out of this, Lena said. I would, but he keeps looking in places he shouldn't. That's not his job. Then what is his job, Simon? Silence. Then, to finish what I started. Meanwhile, Ethan returned to his childhood home on Redwood Lane. It had long been sold to strangers, but he needed to see it. To remember, in the basement behind the old fuse box, he found something else. A scratched message on the wall beneath peeling paint. "We are what he made us. SC." Simon had been there recently, and now he was leaving breadcrumbs. The next day, Agent Calloway was found unconscious in her apartment. No sign of forced entry. Her files on Daniel, Lena, and Ethan gone. Only one thing was left behind. A chessboard. One piece had been removed. The king. Lena knew what that meant. "Simon's not just tying up loose ends," she told Ethan. "He's staging a takeover." With Daniel in prison and Claire discredited, Simon was moving into position. The bank accounts had been shifted. New shell corporations were popping up in overseas territories, under aliases once used by Daniel. "He's rebuilding the empire," Lena whispered. But his way. Ethan had a choice. He could keep digging, expose Simon, risk being dragged into the very machine he was trying to destroy, or he could join him. Simon had already sent a message. "You've been chosen. Don't fight what you are." Ethan met with Lena one last time at a safe house on the outskirts of Portland. "You have to decide, Ethan," Lena said. "Are you his son or your own man?" "I don't know anymore," Ethan replied. "Then figure it out before he does it for you." The safe house exploded that night. Lena was inside. There were no survivors. Ethan arrived moments too late. The flames roared into the sky. Among the debris, he found one thing untouched by the fire. A single white pawn from the chessboard. Taped to it was a note. "Time to choose a side. SC." Ethan disappeared the next day. He emptied his accounts, burned his phone, went dark, and then whispers began. A figure showing up in Eastern Europe, tracing Daniel's old allies. A man breaking into high-security vaults, uncovering blackmail records, sending information to reporters anonymously. They called him the Ghost of Redwood, but others whispered something more chilling. That Ethan Hartwell hadn't disappeared. He'd evolved. The mind is a fragile thing. Once it's cracked, it can either heal or shatter completely. Ethan Hartwell, in an encrypted message to his anonymous contact. Ethan had become a shadow. It was hard to tell where the man named Ethan Hartwell ended and the figure now known as the Ghost of Redwood began. He moved like a wraith, slipping through the cracks of society, untraceable, invisible. Months had passed since Lena's death, since the fire that consumed everything she had worked to protect. But the world didn't stop turning. Simon's empire grew stronger, more secure, more dangerous. What Simon didn't anticipate was a ghost, a son who was now hunting him, silently but methodically. It began with the money trail. Thousands of dollars moved through an encrypted network of offshore accounts, money meant for Simon's covert operations. But as Simon began to push his reach across Europe and Asia, someone was always one step ahead. Ethan's hands were everywhere. Corporate files disappeared. Key associates turned up missing. Investigators were misled. As Ethan bled Simon's operations dry, he left no trace, only a quiet, growing terror in Simon's mind. "I thought you were dead," Simon muttered to himself, looking at a satellite image of the abandoned ski lodge, the last place he had seen his father's legacy. But the fact was, Ethan wasn't dead. He was something much worse. A specter on the periphery of Simon's carefully constructed world, slowly pulling the strings. Then came the first message. It was a simple email, encrypted to perfection. No trace, no metadata, just the words. "You move, Simon. The game is just beginning." Simon stared at the message, his heart rate quickening. He knew it wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge. Ethan had already begun to play Simon's game, but on his terms. He was baiting Simon, drawing him in like a chess player cornering his opponent. What Simon didn't know was that the game was already over. Ethan had already won. Claire Hartwell's voice echoed in Ethan's mind. She had warned him about the dangers of his legacy, the weight of the family name, the corruptive power it held. But in all her warnings, there was one thing she never fully understood. Ethan wasn't just running from his father's legacy. He was hunting it. Simon's network was wide, but it was also unstable. Ethan's subtle manipulations had already started to unseat Simon's most trusted allies. He was chipping away at the empire piece by piece, while Simon continued to obsess over his own rise to power. Ethan knew something Simon didn't. His own success was built on lies. Daniel Hartwell had always been a man who thought he could control everything. But the moment Simon was born, his first mistake was underestimating one simple truth. He couldn't control people. Ethan wasn't just his son, he was his undoing. The hidden vault in New Hampshire was more than just financial records. It was the key to Simon's downfall. It contained a detailed timeline of Daniel's rise to power, his every move, every mistake. And it contained Simon's own darkest secrets, his crimes, his betrayals, the people he had disposed of to maintain his grip on power. Ethan had the key to it all. Every mistake, every dirty deed Simon had ever committed was locked away, and slowly, it was being fed to the public. Simon began to unravel. His calm, controlled demeanor shifted to something darker, more dangerous. Paranoia gripped him. No longer could he trust his network. No longer could he sleep soundly. There were whispers in the underground criminal world about a new player, a ruthless, cunning figure who was infiltrating his operations. Whispers about someone who knew too much, someone who had access to information no one should have had. Ethan Hartwell's name was never spoken aloud, but it was always felt in the shadows. But it wasn't until the bodies started turning up that Simon realized just how far Ethan had gone. Men who once worked for Simon's organization turned up dead, executed with surgical precision. No fingerprints, no traces, just a clean, violent end. And with each body, Ethan's message grew clearer. You can't hide from your past forever. Simon's past was catching up to him. Ethan was erasing his history. A history that included Simon's father, his darkest deals, and his deepest betrayals. Every criminal network Simon had built was now under attack, its foundation slowly crumbling. But Simon wasn't done yet. He had one final card to play. Simon reached out to Claire, who was still locked away in her Vermont prison. He needed her help. You still have power, he said, his voice cold. Ethan can't escape the past. He will fail. Claire listened, her mind working. She knew Simon was desperate. She had been desperate too. Before the betrayal, before everything went wrong. But Claire also knew something Simon didn't. You think Ethan is your weakness? She asked. No, he's your strength. And now he's come to finish the job he started. For the first time, Simon's control slipped. He hadn't been prepared for that. He hadn't expected her to stand against him. Not after everything. You'll regret this, Claire, Simon hissed. He's a monster. He'll destroy you. But the truth was, Simon had never seen the monster inside his own bloodline. And now, that monster was coming for him. In a small, unmarked office in Prague, Ethan watched the footage of Simon's private meeting with one of his last allies, a Russian arms dealer who had ties to several European governments. Ethan had infiltrated the conversation. Simon was still clinging to the belief that his legacy could be saved, that he could still rise above it all. But Ethan knew better. It wasn't Simon who would rise. It was Ethan. Simon was nothing more than a stepping stone. As the footage ended, Ethan closed his laptop. The final pieces of Simon's empire were falling into place. One last move. One final betrayal. The ghost of Redwood doesn't disappear. Ethan said quietly to himself. He destroys. As Simon prepared for his next move, Ethan was already there, waiting. A final confrontation was inevitable. Simon had no choice but to face his son. In an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Prague, the two would meet. A showdown. Father and son. A legacy built on blood. Simon had prepared for this moment. He knew Ethan's mind. He knew his son's manipulative ways, his coldness, his ability to make others disappear. But Ethan was different now. He wasn't just fighting for revenge. He was fighting for control. As Simon walked into the dimly lit warehouse, he saw Ethan standing there, facing him. "This is it, isn't it?" Simon asked, his voice shaking with the realization of his own fate. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. With one final glance, he moved toward Simon. And that was when it all became clear. Simon wasn't the monster. Ethan was. In the end, it's not about the blood you share. It's about the blood you choose to spill. Ethan Hartwell, to Agent Calloway in a final encrypted message. The cold air bit into Ethan's skin as he stood in the shadows, hidden by the metal beams of the warehouse. His eyes were fixed on Simon, who had just walked into the open space. Simon stood still for a moment, surveying the scene. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the empty warehouse. "Ethan," Simon said, his voice calm but filled with tension. "I knew it would come to this." Ethan stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He had come here for one reason: to finish what was started. Simon's empire had been built on lies, betrayal, and manipulation. It had all been leading to this moment. "You always knew," Ethan replied coldly. "You knew the truth. The one thing you never counted on was that I'd learn to play the game better than you." Simon chuckled, a hollow sound that reverberated in the cold silence of the room. "You think this is a game?" Simon asked. "You think you're just some pawn who can rise up and take what I built?" Ethan's eyes narrowed. He was no pawn. He had never been. "You built an empire on the backs of lies, Simon. I've been taking it down piece by piece, and now it's your turn. Your legacy ends tonight." The tension in the air was thick, as if the warehouse itself was holding its breath. Ethan took a step closer, his every movement deliberate, calculated. He had prepared for this moment for years. Every decision, every manipulation had been leading to this confrontation. He had played his part perfectly, making sure Simon had no escape. But there was one thing Simon didn't know. Ethan had already made his move. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, black device, a remote control. His finger hovered over the button. "What is that?" Simon asked, his voice suddenly tight with suspicion. Ethan's lips curled into a faint, almost sadistic smile. "It's the key to everything you've ever built, Simon." Simon's eyes widened, and for the first time, the cold, calculating facade cracked. He took a step back, realizing that he had underestimated his son, just as he always had. Ethan pressed the button. The warehouse doors slammed shut, and the lights flickered before going out completely. The only source of illumination was the faint glow of Ethan's device. "You think this will stop me?" Simon snarled, his voice rising in anger. "You've made a mistake. No, Simon." Ethan interrupted, his voice deadly calm. "The mistake was thinking I was just a shadow of you. The mistake was thinking that I needed your approval. I've been pulling your strings for months now." Simon tried to move toward the door, but the lock had engaged automatically. There was no escape. He turned to face Ethan, his expression a mix of disbelief and fury. "What have you done?" Simon spat, his voice shaking with rage. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he let the silence settle, letting the full weight of Simon's realization hit him. Ethan had already destroyed Simon's empire. The financial accounts had been drained. The blackmail files had been leaked. The secrets of Simon's criminal activities were now in the hands of the authorities, and Simon was no longer untouchable. But the true blow was yet to come. Ethan took a step forward, his eyes locked onto Simon's. "I didn't just destroy your empire, Simon," he said quietly. "I've made sure your past will catch up to you. Every person you've ever hurt, every lie you've ever told. It's all coming out, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Simon's face twisted in fury. He lunged at Ethan, but the chains that had been rigged to the walls of the warehouse tightened, restraining him. The sound of the chains rattling echoed through the room. "You've lost," Ethan said, his voice a low whisper. "You can't outrun this. You never could." Simon struggled, but it was pointless. The game was over. Ethan had won. Simon's breath came in ragged gasps as he realized the full extent of his defeat. But there was one final card he had yet to play. "You think this is it?" Simon asked, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've just set in motion, Ethan." Ethan's gaze hardened, his mind already working through the implications of Simon's words. Simon wasn't just fighting for his life. He was trying to manipulate Ethan one last time. "Don't try to manipulate me," Ethan replied. "I've already seen through all your games." Simon's eyes flickered with a dangerous glint. "You haven't seen it all," Simon hissed. "The final betrayal. You're just as much a part of this as I am." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had thought he had anticipated everything. But this was something new. Simon's final move was simple but deadly. He had planted a bomb that would go off in mere minutes, destroying everything in its path, including Ethan. Ethan's hand went to his pocket, but before he could react, Simon's laughter echoed through the warehouse. "You think you've won?" Simon said again, his voice dripping with malicious amusement. "You've only just begun to understand the game. And when this place goes up in flames, you'll realize there's no escaping what's coming." Ethan's eyes narrowed. He had no time to waste. He moved quickly, calculating the seconds that were ticking away. The bomb was well placed, but Ethan had anticipated this. He had already deactivated the device remotely. But Simon didn't know that. Simon was trapped in the chains, his empire destroyed, his future crumbling. And yet, in his mind, he still believed he could win. He still thought there was a way out. But the truth was, Simon had already lost. The final betrayal wasn't a bomb. It was the one thing Simon had never accounted for: Ethan's will to survive. Ethan turned his back to Simon, walking toward the door that was now open. "I'm not you, Simon," Ethan said, his voice cold. "I don't need to destroy everything to prove a point. I've already won." Simon screamed in frustration, but it was too late. The lights flickered back on, the sound of sirens wailing in the distance. The authorities were coming. Simon's empire was over. Ethan stepped out into the night, the weight of his victory settling over him. He had destroyed the man who had tried to control him, and now he was free. As Ethan walked away from the crumbling warehouse, the sun began to rise on a new day. He had taken back control of his life, but the scars would always remain. He had learned the hard way that the blood you choose to spill is what defines you. And sometimes, in order to survive, you must be willing to betray even the ones who gave you life. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about freedom.